Day 3 of the Trump impeachment defiance situation. The president just mocked a federal judge's arrest order on live television, happened 45 minutes ago, called the ruling completely unconstitutional, and said he'll ignore it absolutely. He said no court has the authority to arrest a sitting president, and this is the most ridiculous thing he's ever seen. He went on for 8 minutes about judicial overreach and said judges should stick to their lanes. 45 minutes. That's how fast this escalated from legal dispute to direct executive defiance. One moment we had a legal question being discussed in appeals courts. The next moment we had a constitutional crisis playing out on live television in real time. This is not normal political news. This is something entirely different. This is the moment America finds out if the rule of law actually exists. 3 days, 12 major developments. Here's where we are. Trump is under an arrest warrant, publicly defiant, claiming he won't comply with federal court orders under any circumstances. Congress is now discussing an emergency session to address the crisis. A federal judge issued detention authority, and Trump just announced on live TV that he won't follow it. His legal team has no response. His allies in Congress are silent. His staff is scrambling. Today changed everything about how we understand presidential authority. A sitting president just said on camera that he won't comply with federal court orders. That's not a legal argument. That's open defiance. That's a president saying courts don't have power over him. But most coverage is treating this like a normal political story, like there are two sides to debate here. I'm going to show you the complete timeline, where this started Wednesday, where it is right now, where 3 separate constitutional crises are heading simultaneously. 3 tracks, all moving, all connected. By the end, you'll see what separates this from every previous presidential confrontation with courts in American history. Let's map this out. Trump is under arrest warrant, claimed executive immunity that courts rejected, now openly defying federal judge. Judge Margaret Chen issued a detention order and is watching to see if the president will comply. Congress is deeply divided, some members calling for immediate impeachment, others demanding negotiation, others saying wait for courts to decide. Active proceedings include a federal contempt case in U.S. District Court as the primary track, a House Judiciary Committee impeachment investigation as the second track, and an appeals court constitutional emergency hearing as the third track that will happen Saturday morning. Immediate pressure points. An emergency congressional session possibly tonight or tomorrow morning, and an appeals court ruling expected within 48 hours on whether the president must comply or has some immunity from courts. That's the snapshot. Now let me show you how 3 days turned a legal dispute into a constitutional crisis that nobody can control. 4 weeks ago, the House Judiciary Committee subpoenaed Trump for testimony about alleged abuse of pardon powers during his previous term. Documents showed he allegedly pardoned people in exchange for payments. A constitutional law professor predicted if Trump ignores this subpoena, the courts will have to decide if a sitting president can be jailed for contempt. What happened? Trump claimed executive privilege, which was rejected by Judge Chen. Trump missed the first deadline and was ordered to appear in court. Trump missed the second deadline and contempt charges were filed. Each time, his legal team escalated rather than complied. They didn't negotiate. They didn't try to work something out. They kept fighting. Wednesday, May 20th, day 1. At 2:33 p.m., Judge Chen issues an arrest warrant for Trump for contempt of Congress subpoena. She stated, "The president is not above the law." Those 6 words changed everything. She signed the warrant herself. Immediate reaction included the White House counsel issuing a denial, Senate Republican leaders calling for emergency negotiation to avoid crisis, and House progressives demanding immediate arrest. The political establishment went into shock. 53 minutes. That's how fast political response came. What most people missed, Judge Chen's order included language saying she has power to enforce against any person, including presidents. She anticipated the immunity claim before Trump even made it. She was prepared for this. Thursday, May 21st, day 2. At 7:15 a.m., Trump's legal team files an emergency appeal claiming executive immunity from judicial process. They argued that sitting presidents cannot be arrested or compelled by courts. This changed the timeline from immediate arrest to an appellate question. This was their delaying tactic. Let's fight it in higher courts. Judge Chen scheduled an expedited appeals hearing for Saturday morning. She refused to delay. She set the hearing within 48 hours. She wasn't going to let this stretch out. New players entered the situation. 3 federal judges were pulled into emergency panel review. The Attorney General took the formal position that the president cannot be arrested while serving in office. International media began covering this as a potential constitutional breakdown of America. BBC, Reuters, all major international outlets were following. The story split from one contempt case into 3 separate constitutional crises, all moving at once. Friday, May 22nd, day 3, today. At 11:47 a.m., Trump holds a press conference. He mocks Judge Chen. He says the arrest order is an absolute disgrace, and he won't comply with it. He states, they can't arrest a sitting president. It's unconstitutional. Everyone knows it. He calls her incompetent. He suggests she's politically motivated. This is where we are now. The pattern. Each day, Trump's legal team tried delaying tactics. Each day, federal courts tightened the timeline and rejected immunity claims harder. 3 days. One subpoena became a contempt charge, became presidential defiance broadcast on live television to millions. The original strategy, claiming immunity and waiting for appeals, became public refusal to obey courts. And this pattern is crucial to understand because it shows how miscalculation compounds. Trump thought he could buy time. The courts thought they could force compliance through pressure. Trump thought defying on camera would energize his base. What he actually did was commit an act of defiance on live television that nobody could explain away or normalize. Subscribe. This timeline keeps expanding every few hours. Yesterday's key development. Trump's legal team filed an emergency appeal claiming presidential immunity from all judicial process. They argued in federal court that courts lack power to compel sitting presidents. Why it mattered? It separated the constitutional question from the contempt question. No longer just about whether he testified, now it was about whether courts have any power over presidents. It created an appellate record of Trump explicitly claiming he cannot be compelled by courts. What it set up? It forced higher courts to decide whether sitting presidents have constitutional immunity from arrest, a major constitutional question that had never been directly litigated in American history. This was unprecedented. Before yesterday, Trump could claim he was just fighting this one subpoena and it would eventually get resolved. After yesterday, federal courts had a filed motion saying presidents cannot be jailed for non-compliance. That's a much bigger claim. That shift enabled today's defiance. Trump's lawyers essentially wrote the constitutional argument he used at the press conference this morning. Yesterday's immunity claim in legal papers became today's public defiance talking points. His exact quote at the press conference was, "They can't arrest a sitting president. It's unconstitutional." That's verbatim from yesterday's legal filing. Yesterday's appeal didn't delay the crisis. It escalated the constitutional question and gave Trump the framing for today's open defiance. Yesterday's move turned legal strategy into public confrontation on national television. Today's development? President Trump held a press conference and openly mocked the federal judge's arrest warrant. At 11:47 a.m., he said the order was unconstitutional and claimed he wouldn't comply under any circumstances. He called Judge Chen names. Video clips have been viewed 47 million times in the first 3 hours across all platforms: TikTok, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook. Why this is different from Wednesday and Thursday. Wednesday was when courts issued an arrest warrant. That's a judicial action, a legal proceeding, something that happens in courtrooms, in paperwork. Thursday was when Trump claimed immunity. That's a legal argument, argued through attorneys in documents and filings filed with courts. Today, Trump openly defied courts on live TV. That's an executive action, a direct confrontation, a public statement, a moment that changed the nature of the entire crisis from legal to political to constitutional. 3 specific changes became absolutely clear today. Before today, this was a confidential legal dispute between the president and courts that could theoretically be resolved quietly behind closed doors. After today, this is a public standoff broadcast on every news network and social media platform globally. Impossible to manage quietly, impossible to spin away, impossible to walk back. Before today, Trump could claim his lawyers made the immunity argument and he was just following legal advice from his team. After today, Trump personally said he won't comply with court orders. That's not a legal defense. That's an admission of defiance. That's a sitting president saying on camera he will not obey federal courts. That changes everything, legally, politically, and constitutionally. Before today, courts could still hope the president would comply if appeals failed and would eventually respect the judicial process. After today, the president pre-announced he won't comply, regardless of appeals outcome or what judges decide. Courts are now forced to act, or their entire authority system collapses. The cumulative effect. 3 days ago, this was a legal subpoena dispute about testimony and document production. 2 days ago, it was a presidential immunity question in appeals court about constitutional law and precedent. Today, it's executive defiance of federal courts on live television for the entire world to see. Each day removed the possibility of a quiet resolution. Today eliminated the possibility of backing down. Trump publicly committed to defiance in front of millions of people. Courts now have no choice but to enforce or admit they cannot. See how each day locked in the next? Like this. This isn't one story anymore. It's 3 simultaneous stories. Track 1 is federal court enforcement. The status? Judge Chen issued an arrest warrant that is legally valid and stands. Trump claimed immunity from judicial process. An appeals panel meets Saturday morning to hear arguments about whether presidents can have immunity from courts. Key date, Saturday, 9 a.m., an emergency constitutional hearing that will be closely watched by legal experts and international observers. What happens? 3 federal judges will decide if a sitting president can be arrested by federal marshals for defying court orders. If they say yes, and Trump won't comply, then enforcement becomes the actual question, the real question. Do federal marshals actually go and arrest a sitting president? Do they remove him from the White House? How does that even work legally and practically and politically? Track 2 is House impeachment response. The status? The House Judiciary Committee is investigating Trump's defiance of court orders and his abuse of presidential power. Some members are demanding an immediate impeachment vote. Others want to see what the courts do first. Key date, Saturday evening. A House leadership emergency meeting to discuss strategy and next steps and how to respond. What happens? Congress decides whether Trump's public defiance of courts constitutes an impeachable offense under the Constitution. Is defying federal court orders an impeachable act? The answer is probably yes, but Congress has to vote on it. Congress has to take the action. Track 3 is executive versus judicial constitutional crisis. The status? The Attorney General took a formal position that the president cannot be arrested while serving in office. This creates a direct conflict between the executive branch and the judicial branch, a true separation of powers crisis. Key date, Saturday. If courts order arrest and Trump refuses, we have a genuine separation of powers breakdown. What happens? Who enforces a court order against a sitting president? The Attorney General works for the president and reports directly to him. The FBI reports to the Attorney General. The U.S. Marshal Service answers to the Attorney General. So if courts order arrest and the president says no, the only people who can carry out the arrest all work for the president. That's the constitutional deadlock. That's the problem. How they connect. The Track 1 federal court outcome affects Track 2 House impeachment. Because if courts order arrest Saturday, Congress faces immediate impeachment pressure and must act. The pressure becomes unbearable politically. Track 2 outcome affects Track 3, because if the House impeaches Saturday night, it changes every law enforcement agency's calculation about whether to follow the judge's order. If Trump is impeached and removed, he's not the president anymore. The constitutional crisis evaporates. They're not separate stories. They're synchronized. If Track 1 moves first with a Saturday court order, Tracks 2 and 3 are both activated immediately. Congress must meet. Agencies must choose between president and courts. If Track 2 moves first with a House impeachment Saturday, Track 1 court becomes a backup enforcement mechanism. The courts might not even need to enforce because Congress removed the president. If Track 3 moves first with the Attorney General refusing to enforce, Congress and courts both have to respond immediately. All three happen within 24 hours. This is not a problem that stretches out over weeks. This is a problem that reaches critical point Saturday and must be resolved. Who matters at this point? President Trump. His position is under arrest warrant issued by a federal judge, publicly defiant, claiming constitutional immunity that courts have rejected. His strategy is betting that courts won't actually enforce arrest against a sitting president, that appeals will delay indefinitely, that political pressure will mount on Congress to negotiate. His power is he controls executive agencies, the FBI, federal marshals. Those are the people who would enforce arrest. He also controls the Justice Department. Her position is federal judge who issued an arrest warrant and scheduled emergency appellate hearing for Saturday. Her strategy is forcing the constitutional question into public view by scheduling Saturday emergency hearing and refusing to delay. She won't allow this to drag out. Her power is she can order arrest, can hold the president in contempt, can impose sanctions and fines. But she has no enforcement mechanism if the executive refuses. Their position is deciding whether to call emergency session and whether to pursue impeachment vote. Their strategy is trying to find a legislative solution rather than constitutional crisis. They want negotiation. Their power is they can impeach, removing constitutional immunity argument, and they control House floor time. Who dropped out? Trump's Senate allies went completely silent after the public defiance quote. The immunity argument collapsed when Trump said it out loud on camera. Republican Party institutionalists cannot defend defiance of courts publicly without destroying their own rule of law claims. The power dynamic shifted from Trump controlling through legal claims of immunity to courts controlling through constitutional question of enforcement to Congress controlling through impeachment threat. Trump has operational power. He controls federal agencies. But he has lost legal power since courts ordered arrest and is losing political power since Congress is considering impeachment. This is a constitutional crisis. Stay with me. The next 24 hours determine everything. Why 3 days matters. We've moved from theoretical constitutional questions to actual enforcement crisis, from debate to confrontation. The precedent. Before this week, constitutional scholars debated whether courts can compel sitting presidents. After this week, we're finding out in real time whether courts have actual enforcement power. Concrete example. You believe in rule of law. You believe courts make binding decisions. Before this week, that belief was theoretical. Courts order things, the executive complies, life goes on. After this week, if Trump defies Saturday's court order and nothing happens, rule of law becomes a suggestion, not law, just words. 3 days created the moment where rule of law either means something or doesn't. If courts arrest Trump, courts have real power over the executive branch, and separation of powers works. If courts try to arrest Trump and he refuses, the judicial system just learned it cannot enforce against the executive when the executive controls enforcement agencies. If Congress impeaches Trump first, they admit courts couldn't do it alone and had to use legislative power. 3 days until we find out if the American constitutional system actually works, or if a president can simply ignore courts. This is the most important constitutional test since Lincoln. 3 moments mattered most. Moment 1, Judge Chen issues arrest warrant on Wednesday at 2:33 p.m. Judge Chen issued an actual arrest warrant with her signature. Not a threat, not a hypothetical, an actual legal document. This made it real, not theoretical, not the courts might do this someday. An actual warrant for a sitting president. That had never happened before in American history. If this hadn't happened, Trump could have continued claiming this was just a legal dispute that would work out eventually. Moment 2. Trump claims executive immunity Thursday morning. Trump's attorneys explicitly argued that a sitting president has constitutional immunity from judicial process. This put the constitutional question directly before courts. They couldn't ignore it. They had to rule on whether sitting presidents are above courts. If this hadn't happened, courts might have found other ways to get testimony without confronting presidential power directly. Moment 3. Trump mocks judge on live TV at 11:47 a.m. this morning. Trump personally said he won't comply, called it unconstitutional, and mocked Judge Chen by name. This removed any possibility of quiet resolution.